Today, I am delighted to welcome Dave Garrett to the show. Dave is a senior advisor to the CEO of PMI and focuses on key projects important to PMI's missions and community. Formerly at PMI, Dave served as Chief Strategy and Growth Officer, VP of Corporate Development and Innovation, VP of Transformation, and many, many more. And before that, he co-founded projectmanagement.com in 2000, which I was aware of. And I didn't realize, to my chagrin, that it was ganthead.com before, which I knew, and that was my first sort of web page of project management stuff. And he served as a CEO there for 17 years. So, Dave, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Nigel. Thanks so much for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. So, do you want to just tell the listeners a little bit? There's quite a bit of information there, but a little bit about you. Where are you? How you kind of got where you are? Family, friends,
Sure.
hobbies, whatever.
No, sure. I'm actually in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., here in the U.S. I've been in the project management field, if you will, for, gosh, I want to say 30 years, a long time. I'm dating myself a little bit, but I'll go ahead and do that. And I've really enjoyed the community aspect of it. Ever since Ganthead, I think the thing that got me excited about it was the fact that people that are project managers they sometimes have a difficult time on the job because it's a lonely job. People are asking you questions from above and from below, and there's a lot of pressure involved in the job, and no one's doing exactly what you're doing at your organization. But you can reach out across the community of project managers and find people who can help. You can find people who are doing similar work, strike up conversations, and you get a lot of support from the community at large. And that was the idea behind Ganthead when we started it, and obviously behind PMI now, just to create a large community that's big enough to be very supportive for just about any type of project manager out there. And I think when you go to these events, whether it's a summit for PMI, or in the old days, there were lots and lots of project management events where you could come together with project managers. You get so much appreciation from them around the tools we provided at the time and what we provide now as PMI. There's just so much excitement out there in the community. It's palpable when you see people in person, especially. So that's one of the things I love about project management. And, I'd say the other is just getting things done, getting things done through teams of people. I think whenever I talk to someone who's a young person, a Gen Zer, that kind of thing, they always want to do something special. They always want to accomplish something, have a contribution to the world. And what I tell them is you can have a really great contribution to the world as an individual, but you can have an even greater contribution as running a team, leading a team. So project management is a great career path for young folks as well. And I think it's starting to catch on there.
I agree. It's that leverage, isn't it? It's always something about the fact you can um, the influence you can have, and it's really interesting because I went to the PMI Synergy event back in 2019, the UK one that Chris Field over in the UK and that team were running, and a great event. And I bumped into a couple of people who were doing degrees in project management, and they were 20, 21-year-olds doing degrees in project management. When I was 20, 21, I didn't know what project management was, and it kind of came across very much that is there's a change in emphasis on what my daughter, I've got a daughter who's 18, what they want to do. They're not hunting for a title anymore, are they? They're hunting to do something, and changing the world is what project managers do.
Right.
And kind of you can see how that can join, can't it? You may not have the direct skills to do the things you want to do, but like you say, if you have the skills to direct. God, I've made up a phrase there. Just all right. I'm going to remember that. I think. Yeah, you made up this. Yeah, I'll forget. I'll have to go back over it. But yeah, that sort of change in emphasis, because when I was growing up, certainly it was to be an accountant, to be a lawyer, to be a doctor. There's still a bit of that, but it's more about the outcomes, and it's kind of the movement from projects rather than delivering the project. You deliver the outcomes. We'll get onto that, I'm sure, in a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. We used to always talk about the accidental project manager as a universal way to get into the profession.
Yeah.
Like we used to say, no one actually does this on purpose. No, they're not choosing between astronaut, fireman, and project manager when they're young, but they end up in it as a result of the work they're doing and just sort of leveling up within their whatever their team is, team of engineers, team of coders, team of whatever. They level up and become the manager of an effort, and suddenly they look up and they're a project manager, and hopefully they enjoy it.
Yeah. On good days, you do, don't you?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. It depends on the day. It's same as every job, though, really, isn't it? Is that there are good and there are bad bits of any role and any job, and there's boring bits, there's exciting bits. Actually, most of it's boring, to be honest. Not most of it isn't that. Because and my episodal mention of managertools.com's website, the fact that they talk about um, uh, the fact that management isn't sexy. There isn't loads of stuff going on, and it is all about consistency. And it's about and that's the same transfers into project management. Like, it's that consistent behaviours for most of the time with these spikes of um, in quotes excitement when you're going live or kicking off a project or whatever. Those are where you get those major steps that happen. Whereas the rest of it, ideally, you want it to be quite boring because it's otherwise it's hard work, isn't it?
It is
So
hard work, but sometimes when you're collaborating, sometimes when you have high interaction amongst the team, those can be the most exciting times because you discover new things, you get contributions from people that you never would have expected. So it depends on
yeah,
the moment, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, I think I found that some of my most memorable projects have been, and some of the strongest relationships you build with team members, and team members build actually together in spite of the project manager sometimes. That they can build that. I can't remember what the phrase is, but that sort of um, everyone's in it together. You're all going for the same goal. You're
All
all
right.
having pizza at 11 o'clock at night when you don't want to be there. You want to be with family, but you're all together in there doing it, and you can, and you're. It's kind of not quite them and us, but you become that culture of that team, and it's. I remember there was years ago on a project where we were doing a HR move or payroll move thing, and there was a problem with one of the interfaces. Now we set the interfaces to run off. This is way back when they would have took ages to run, and we headed off to grab some food that evening. We were consulting, and then a couple of beers, and then one of the guys drove back, check everything, and it wasn't finished. So we're all sat there with printouts, manually keying stuff from one system into the new system, and
Mhm.
you're all there. You've got a ruler, you're doing it, and you highlight it. And he did it, and I'm hope we got it all right. Anyway, I think we did. We didn't get too many problems with it, but it was again that feeling of oneness of a team. You're all in it together, and we're just doing what needed to be done to get
You,
the project over the line. And
you're absolutely right.
I remember every face from that team.
People do all these team building exercises and they think they're doing something productive. And I think most of the time those don't work as well, but nothing builds a team like a shared struggle.
Yeah,
There's nothing like a shared struggle to build a team.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Agree. So thinking about I'm sitting here now looking at your LinkedIn profile
Mhm.
and all of your sort of background there, and you obviously got the uh, Gantt head and I just it was a real blast from the past seeing that written on your thing, like Gantt head, because a very fond memory of that. Um, and I didn't realise the transfer. But well, how did you actually get into it being project management that you were doing? What were you doing before that, and how was it that it was Gantt head at Spelson? How did you think actually I think I can do this and contribute in
Yeah.
this way?
I was working for a consulting firm at the time, a really small boutique consulting firm. It was James Martin and Company. Probably no one here has ever heard of it, but it was a UK based firm that only had a couple hundred people in it. And
Right.
we did all sorts of IT work. And we looked around and realized project managers around the world often don't have the same kind of support that a consulting firm does. They don't have the people they can reach out to, and they don't necessarily have all the templates and tools and processes and that sort of thing that they really need. At the time, that was more true than it is now, that
Yeah,
they really need to make things happen. Today it's different. Today you've got ChatGPT, just ask it a question and it spins out as
yeah,
something, quite good. If you know how to prompt it, you can get something excellent. But at the time, there really wasn't that sort of guidance. There really wasn't that sort of reference that you could turn to, either in the form of templates or people.
yeah,
And it was just more difficult. PMI had chapters at the time when we started this, and that those were wonderful. Always have been wonderful, especially if you're trying to get a job or just getting continuous education. Even back then, those are always great. But the tools and templates thing was something that was, you might find some of them in a book. In the early days of the internet, they just didn't exist, for
yeah.
people. So we thought we have something to offer here. We could spin this out as something different. And that was the beginning of Gadhead, which was really in the year 2000, about 2 months before the market crash. So it was an interesting time to launch a website, right at the top of the dot-com boom, and and, right right as it crashed. So interesting time, but a difficult, but a good time in the end.
Yeah. That's interesting because it makes you wonder because and that's what I think. I suppose that's probably why one of the reasons why it sits so brightly there in my mind is the fact that the absence of that community. Like I was um, uh, in the PMI chapter, the obviously you travel with
Mhm.
that, which is a little bit there, and then you had uh, the online element of it was kind of rising at that point, as you say, and I can see why that kind of you kind of embedded yourself there. And I imagine that the escalation of project management as a capability through those years as well as the dot com, I said the dot com boom, the IT boom there, that was starting to become these roles that we do become sort of like snowballing, and it's just continued, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
Y2K was a big player in that.
yeah.
As we rolled up on Y2K, everyone wanted to figure out how to deal with their projects. That was the top question with organizations. How do we manage projects consistently? How do we speak the same language? All of that. Right before the Y2K non-crisis, I guess, as we went through it, it turned out not as big a deal as we thought. But there was a lot of chatter about that leading up to it, and a lot
It's
of
an
growth
interesting
project
question
management.
there.
Yeah.
I got an interesting question when I'd like your thoughts, especially with the context of success.
Hmm.
Um, Y2K, I
Hmm.
was running processes. I was running a proving program. So it was an accounting, so a load of accounting services that we ran for a bank. And I was part of my role was to take all of our systems and we've got our um, disaster recovery system. We had it brought down and plugged in near us, had tapes took out, backed up onto there, so as if we were doing a full restore, and then we rolled it forward in real time into the dates into 2000 to check that all the updates we'd done worked, and it worked and it's fine. I think it might be got the odd tweak of something that didn't quite get caught, but um, is when you're trying to stop something happening,
Hmm.
it's really hard to prove that was successful or a waste of money, isn't it? It's
It
kind of,
is.
as you said there, it wasn't as hard, big a deal as everyone made out to be, which probably the making out to the newspaper headlines and TV show things were to get ratings. But there was a lot of work
Hmm.
and it was a lot of change. And I just wonder whether it's one of those things where you were it's like the project manager who runs all their projects that are always green and always deliver on time and never have a problem and never get the recognition for being a great project manager because they're just quiet. Do you think there's a little bit of that went on with Y2K?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's funny. We were just talking before we started here about that type of issue. As a project manager, you often get told, you often never get the credit when positive things happen, and we get all of the credit when things go south. So that's a tough position to be in, and I think um, PMI is we're trying to help people work their way out of that, sort of trying to map out the future of the profession as one sort of one work stream. I think strategically we're trying to help project managers level up and get out of the place where they're always feeling blamed and never feeling like they get the recognition they deserve for their effort, which are significant and meaningful. So we want to surface all that.
Yeah, it is. I've always described the project manager role as quite lonely, and I've felt from a mental health point of view as well. I've never really thought about it until recent years. And you sit there without that. Um, I don't know. It just feels like you haven't got anyone sometimes who understands what's going on, depending on the environment you're in. Depending on, you could be a PM and the only PM in the organisation that you're doing something for, or you could be a PM in an organisation with lots of PMs, but actually you're so focused on what you do that you don't get that community because we're all too busy to do it. To be able to go, oh, it's not just me. Because I sat there sometimes and I'm thinking, am I just rubbish at this when things are just not going the right way? And eventually I'll have someone come in who's new to the area I'm working in, and maybe we're doing through stuff, and they're sitting there going, how the hell are you doing all this? Well, how's this working? Well, I don't understand it. And I'm like, oh, great. It isn't just me. It,
Yeah.
it and you get that because you do end up in that little bubble, and you kind of there's I can't remember what it's described as, and you end up we take the blame. It's not just that we get blamed. I don't think is we step up. If you're a project manager, you own that project. It's yours, and you're going to deliver it. When it goes wrong, we do. Most of us go, "That's my fault. I didn't do something right to make sure the team did it right." Now, it's not always true. Do you know what I mean? Because there's always something you could have done in any
Mhm.
situation differently, but in hindsight, you don't know that that was the right thing to do. And it isn't always but you are accountable for it. And that accountability phrase means we stand up and take the crap. And as you say, and then we step aside, don't we? As we talk about, and you step aside and then go, yeah, this team are brilliant. You did a great, fantastic job. Well done, everyone. And and sometimes you do get to that point when, especially when you've been knocking around for a while, and you just think, can someone just say I'm good? So at some point, can someone just say, yeah, well done to you? Or maybe that's just me in my career. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's yeah.
Well, I think
I get the feeling that it might be wider than just me.
yeah, and of course that resonates with me, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've been talking a lot about the future of the profession, how it's going to evolve, how we see it playing out, you know, uh, in actually the very near future. And we're trying to help people understand um, through the project success work, behaviors they could adopt to advance their career. And I think executives at the end of the day really appreciate that accountability. They really appreciate that sense of ownership you were just describing, even though sometimes it doesn't, feel that way to some of us, or maybe all of us. Um, but there's a concept that we call MORE, MORE. It's an acronym that I think will really help project managers going forward. And it's based on what we understood from holistically from the research we did this past year, and I think it's really helpful. I'll walk through the four concepts really quick. The first is M for manage perceptions. So we know that project success is there are different views of project success across all of your project stakeholders, right? People may, one person may think it's a complete success. Another person may think, oh, it's, this part of it was good, this part of it was bad. Someone else may think of it as a complete failure. How do you understand all of the perceptions of the project and what underpins them? How do you better understand each stakeholder's intent for the project, what that project means to that stakeholder, and then how it all comes together and in an aligned way That's really important. Those perceptions are really important. We think about data, being data driven and all of that, and we want to do that. But at the end of the day, success is not something that's calculated. Success is perceived. The data that we offer is a really great foundation for those perceptions. But at the end of the day, there's human beings doing it. It's not calculated, or determining that it's not calculated. I'll run through these others quickly as well. O is for ownership. So owning project success beyond project management success. So meaning like owning it beyond execution. That doesn't mean, the triple constraint doesn't matter. The triple constraint is foundational and important. But beyond the triple constraint is the value the project delivers that's really important as well. It may occur 2 years after. You may see that value 2 years after project close or 5 years after project close. But if you have that value in mind that you're trying to generate through the project throughout, then you plan for that success. You set the project up for success. Even, something needs to happen 2 years downstream. Well, you plan for that. You set the organization up to make that happen, so the success happens downstream. And that's really important. That is that sort of broadened view of accountability, like you were just mentioning a moment ago. It's not just about, did I get it on time? Did I get it done within cost? All those things important. But did I produce the value that everyone saw, that we sort of intended, the vision for the project? Did that happen downstream? And it's likely that you may have moved on to another project, but your sponsor is still going to be there. Your executive, is still going to be there. At the end of the day, the customers, the organization, the customers of the project are going to feel it, and you want to be accountable for that, because that's really what matters at the end of the day. So that's O, and I think that's helpful. Um, R is for relentlessly reassessing project parameters. So what are how are we being agile in all of this? The world is changing constantly now, not just sort of, um, it's a, what do we call it, a post VUCA world now, so things are beyond VUCA, not just in terms of technology evolving. We've got AI, we've got all kinds of things happening in the world. The geopolitical situation is very interesting right now. So there's a lot of things to deal with. How do we adjust our approach to get to the intent of the project? How do we adjust? Um, there may be the value of the project itself may change over time. The desired value, how do we pivot and adjust as needed for that? And how are we looking for those changes, not trying to avoid them, but actually looking to identify them and surface them as project managers. Being proactive about that is going to be important. And then finally, E is for expanded perspective. So we know we need to understand the connection to the strategy, the organizational strategy. We also know intuitively we need to understand the impact on other projects and business functions, within the organization. Maybe there's resourcing impacts. Maybe there's, a couple of projects stack up to produce value together as a program, or um, anything like that. There's a lot of business acumen that goes into the work of project management today that wasn't as true 10 years ago or further. And even looking to the impact of projects on our world, like internally, if we're working on a new certification, we're thinking this is going to produce a lot of jobs out there in the world for people, or help them get into jobs that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get into. And that's a very motivational, part of the work, understanding the impact on the world. Hopefully there's some sort of sustainability impact, or, even though that isn't in vogue in the moment, but you'd be surprised. Based on our survey, it was very, very important to the project stakeholders that we surveyed, and we could talk more about that downstream.
Yeah, it's interesting because that whole the whole a line in there, and I think it's really interesting. The, because I look at, I, 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 because I look at, from a project manager point of view, my brain's clicking there. From a project manager point of view, you get a very different levels of engagement at a different point in a project.
Hmm.
And you will have, I've had situations where I'm running team PMs running piece, or I'm running pieces of work that are, here's what you've got to do on this system. And that's the parameters of, here's my request. That's what I want. It's almost a change request, but it's
Hmm.
the customer has already gone through it. They've already thought about it. They know what they want. Give me one of those, please.
Hmm.
And I manage a team to do that. Now, in the bigger picture of what they're managing, they might have 10 other suppliers doing something, or
Hmm.
doing stuff internally. And then having that PM will own that vision, maybe, or maybe not. They may be leading into someone else who owns it. But you kind of get, it's turtles all the way down, if people know Terry Pratchett. But it's you, depending where you are in that PM hierarchy, if you like,
Hmm.
your influence on those end results. And I'm just thinking about that managed perceptions and looking beyond
Hmm.
to be able to manage your stakeholders, because you've got people just JFDI in it in some ways, that that's what they want you to do. Deliver me that. That's it. Don't you, Nige? It's not up for you to think about the end customer. Keep in your lane and just deliver that piece of technology that we've told you to do.
Hmm.
Now, that's hard from a PM point of view, when you can look at it and you go, if this was me using this system at the end of it, I'd be going ballistic because I think it's terrible. Or if it does, do you know what I mean? The way the money's been spent, or there's any number of reasons. So, what kind of advice would you give people on, from that point of view, of having that influence?
Hmm.
Maybe it is about influence, or how do they square off the fact that actually you could spend all the time trying to get into that space, and actually in the scope of what you're doing at the moment, that maybe that particular project isn't where you can do that as proactively as maybe if you owned the whole program from start to finish. Long
Yeah.
question, sorry.
No, no, no. It's great. I think um, more as a concept can help you become one of those higher level turtles, if you will, move up the stack. And I think it's more of a mindset than anything else. It's thinking at a higher level, being able to have those higher level conversations with your stakeholders and offering insight. At the end of the day, if you really understand your material, you really understand those interactions with other projects, you understand the connection to the strategy, you make it your business to become a business partner, not just an administrator. I think
That's,
that's what it comes down to. You sort of earn trust, you earn your influence, the way that you were describing it, by providing insight, by being a business partner that understands at least a significant part of the project better than anyone else. And it's that sort of deep interest in the work, it's that deep interest in delivering value, it's that ownership, of the success of the project as a whole. It's a real driver. And I think it's helpful, and it makes the work more meaningful too. You see, if you understand like the what you're delivering at the end of the day is real value, that's much more motivating than saying I'm delivering these deliverables. These are, this is what I'm producing. I'm producing some paper for you and maybe a slide deck. Who wants to do that? It's yeah, maybe some people do, but yeah, it's to me it's less motivational.
it's like there's whether it's a true story or was it apocryphal? I can't even say the word. A made up story, but of the guy sweeping up in NASA in the '60s, and it's kind of like, oh, what are you? There's someone saying, oh, you just sweep the things. He said, no, I'm putting the man on the moon, because he's
Right,
part of that team putting the man on the moon. And
right.
that kind of mindset of any role, of how you see it contributing, and that's quite difficult when you're busy, you're in a silo, you feel like you the influence is limited. But even those tiny mindset changes will get you to the point where you'll go, should we really do this? And if it plants the seed of, should we really do this, through the rest of the decision making process, and it may turn around and say, actually, we shouldn't be doing this. This is a waste of money, a waste of resources. It's not contributing to society. It's going to damage society. Whatever thing that someone's context may not have picked up, but you might do as an individual. I can see where that would be really useful. And the other thing I picked up on there is around that the VUCA, as you said. It's funny because the topic of the 2019 synergy that I went to was VUCA, and first time I'd ever heard of that phrase was when I went to that, and kind of sat there going, "Yeah, okay, that's really, really useful, really interesting, made me think." And as you say, it's just accelerated that level of uncertainty. That volatility has just gone crazy, and the agility that we've got in I think it goes a little bit back to that a little bit with my point on that is that project managers never motivated or never incentivized to kill a project.
Mm.
Where actually some projects you've been involved with, you should have said we shouldn't do this. Let's kill it now. It's a waste of time, resources, energy, air that I'm breathing, sort of thing. But that constant reevaluating, that looking that retrospective kind of mindset, which I of all of the things in that Scrum and Agile thing, the retrospective I find has been the most powerful, rather than the lessons learned that you do 3 weeks after everyone's dispersed from the project and they won't come to the 1 hour meeting to do your lessons learned machine. So you make them up yourself as a PM and then stick them in a drawer. That normally happens. Whereas if you're doing those constant reevaluations, looking at, should we do this? Is this the right thing? Is it going the right direction? That really does head off. But it is hard to turn around and go, we've spent £500,000 or £1,000,000 and we should stop on something that's very late in it. And a brave PM to turn around and say that. But sometimes it's that ownership again. I can see where it all blurs across that of just making sure that we're doing the right thing, not just doing a thing right. And it's just it's
the thing you're going to feel good about. You're going to feel good about doing the right thing. At the end of the day, even if it isn't just getting it done. It's getting the right things done. All that stuff we used to talk about. Related to portfolios, especially, but even down to the project level, you want to get the right thing done. You don't want to just get the thing done, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
That's more of an administrative exercise versus a business partner exercise.
Yeah, and again, that point there comes up to you mentioned ChatGPT and how there is the threat of AI. I just posted on LinkedIn tonight something I've been messing around with last night, where I took a copy of my book through into a was it Google LM Notebook LM, which is part of Google, and I dropped my book in there, and it created a podcast of two people talking about my book and interviewing each other and talking about why they think. And I'm like flabbergasted. And I've seen a lot of people are nervous, but the general conversations, and I had the same conversation a couple of weeks ago with a couple of people from an AI business looking at lessons learned, and Adam Bodison from the APM over here in the UK as well. And they all talk about the same thing. It's kind of it's a tool we can use, and if you are a project manager who is just administering a project, those are the skills that can get automated, can get Gen AI. That added value of ownership, thinking, business partnership, that creative element of project management is the bit where we as humans add that value. And that's the bit where if we just, as you say, just do that administrative level project management, that's kind of just processing. And we can get rid of a lot of that. And we want to, because it's dull. It's kind of, let's do the interesting stuff is where I look at it.
That's another thing we were thinking of. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
That's kind of what we were thinking of contextually when we came up with more as well. It's that the idea that more of the administrative will be helped by AI. There's going to be augmentation. Actually, we're finding that augmentation is a bigger deal than even automation. How are we getting better? At our jobs as thinkers, as whatever way you want to call it, business partners, strategists, even, like how are we getting better, more business acumen, making business acumen more a part of our jobs, understanding the industries we work in better, understanding the businesses we work in better from a functional perspective, how understanding the questions that we might ask of others and the questions they might ask of us, ahead of time, starting from a different place, becoming editors instead of just primary writers. The hardest thing is to start a document or begin coding something or begin a collaboration. At this point, you can prompt into a mind map and create a basic set of, inputs for a collaboration you're going to do with a group. Start at a completely different place. Start like you would if you were an hour into the conversation, and then everybody in the group can be an editor on that mind map rather than just starting from scratch and ending up at a place that's more generic. Everything gets turbocharged, everything gets moves faster, everything is a little bit richer, because you can say, here's a list of things and what am I missing, or what's a completely different way of looking at this? What is give me 5 ways that I could take this in a different direction that looks like this, or tell me what I'm missing altogether. It's just using it as a thought partner is amazing. I mean, it's just if you get used to doing that, it just um, accelerates everything. It accelerates your work, accelerates how fast you can problem solve, and all of that shouldn't be done in isolation. It should be done with humans involved, not just you, but human collaboration is always valuable in almost every instance there. It's you and somebody else and sort of passing things around and adding their own perspective. It's important.
Yeah, I think a pen and a whiteboard and two people and some coffee in a room for 3 hours is much more powerful than a lot of um, uh, other ways of doing stuff. But then when you feed in something like the Gen AI stuff that you can then use, and I heard it at a concert, it's a while back now, it was on one of my interviews, but about thinking in the mindset of how you would stop a project when you're doing risk management planning, rather than looking what might stop it. Imagine you were trying to jeopardize a project and do that. And you think about if you go into to Copilot or any of those and just go, right, I've got a project delivering an Oracle ERP system with a IBM database underneath, right? And it's for this kind of customer. What would be the best way to kill that project and stop that project? And you've got a risk log that you need to think, well, are they real? What can we go at? And again, it's a different way of looking at. If we did it as an exercise ourselves, different mind. I'm not. I just that conversation there has made me think. We're dropping that kind of thing into those tools, and they'll
Yeah,
come up with the ways that you never thought of that might get the project stopped. And
I,
then you can work out and manage the stakeholder or manage that risk, and it's powerful.
absolutely. Angles you never would have time to explore.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I think that's key too. It's everything you said is wonderful, and I appreciate the fact that you're saying, looking at a situation from a completely different angle. That's the kind of thing that might occur to you and think, oh, I should probably do that, but who has the time, right?
a long list. Yeah,
Yeah, but now you have a way of doing things faster, and it may not be spot on. You're going to have some, just like with humans, you're going to have some mistakes and some things you need to suss out, but that's on you. That's part of your job, to
it's a big option,
determine what's
isn't it?
real and what's not. Yeah, and it's good.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So, we said we were going to talk about success, and I said we'd go down a few rabbit holes, and we have, which is great, um, because they're interesting rabbit holes. And one of the conversations we were connecting on was around the the report on maximizing project success, evaluating the impact of project profession, elevating the impact on our world. As
Mhm.
if I read that off the website.
Yeah.
Or can I just remember? So, um, and I mentioned to you before the call that I did one thing I find myself I very rarely get into flame wars on Twitter or any of those sort of things, but the one that does get my goat is where someone has something about project failure.
Mhm.
And it's usually use our templates because projects fail this much, and if you use our templates, they'll be much better. And I kind of start typing away with my emojis and telling people. But fundamentally, the reason I get that way is because I immediately go to the end of what do you define as failure?
Hmm.
Because that, without a definition of this is what failure means, how can you judge what it is? Now, triple constraint, does failure mean that you've missed the triple constraints?
Hmm.
In my mind, I'd sit there and go, right, if you deliver every project to the triple constraint, that means you haven't looked for opportunities to spend more money and get more benefits and going back and rescoping the project. You haven't looked at ways you could do a bit quicker and reprofile stuff, deliver stuff over earlier value and things. So I immediately start going, well, you're not, in my mind, isn't just deliver the triple constraint, isn't what successful project management. I think that most people agree with that. So I'm guessing it kind of managing perceptions in the Moore model kind of comes towards this as well as a big driver on that. Is it kind of? Do you want to just talk to one kind of why did PMI think let's do this? Why
Right.
bother? It's not going to be a cheap job to do that, and they come up with a position and stuff, and then kind of just talk us around what the sort of findings were.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'd be happy to do that. I think it was a tremendous investment, but a really important one for PMI to make. We have had a renewed purpose for the last couple of years that is maximizing project success to elevate our world, right? That's our mission and purpose as an organization. And it's, obviously in order to maximize project success, you need to define it, you need to be able to measure it, you need to understand what the drivers are behind it. And that was sort of the genesis of this research. And we all, in the background of that, we had the the way project managers think about their work, the AI situation, and the evolving nature of the profession. All of that was good context for the work itself. So, with that in mind, we sort of embarked on this effort that began with a literature review, looking at everything that had been done in the past. Wound up with 150 plus interviews, hour-long interviews of various project stakeholder types. We did a survey that reached out to over 10,000 people. It was an hour-long survey for 10,000 people. So really extensive data gathering, huge investment for PMI, the largest research project we've ever done as an institute, so it's very, very important to us. And we looked around in the beginning of this, and people were defining project success as a pass fail, a very binary exercise. What percentage failed, what percentage didn't fail, that kind of thing. And that's mildly interesting, but not very practical or actionable. You think, okay, so what? This percentage failed or this percentage, were successful. Not such a helpful metric, right? So what we did was, during all of those qualitative interviews, we tried to dig in and say, what really is success? The first thing people were telling us was it's not binary. It's not a success or fully a failure ever. It's always a mixed bag, and that was interesting. So, we looked at how we might develop a scale. We ended up with a 0 to 10 scale where people might rate the level of success that was enjoyed. And I think that was an important step in the process. They also brought out the fact that almost universally in all of those interviews, the word value came up. What the value is really, really important. Value is something that we've had a lot of conversations on LinkedIn about. What is value? You need to define value. And really, the fact that we didn't define value is very, very important to this exercise because people define it differently. And at the end of the day, we went through a number of candidate descriptions, candidate definitions with the qualitative interviews that we went through. It came down to about six of them that we put into the survey. And so we had the survey decide, what the definition of project success was and to what degree people had enjoyed success in during their last project they had approached. And this is across a broad range of stakeholders. So at the end of the day, the definition we came up with is, did your project deliver value that was worth the effort and expense? which is sort of a broad ranging definition, broadly applicable definition that you could apply to just about any project at just about any point in time, because there's a time element to these things as well. We talk a lot about things like the Sydney Opera House,
Yeah.
where there was it was an incredible failure in terms of cost, in terms of time, in terms of, from almost every angle for a period. And then it ultimately, even though all those things were true, turned out to be one of the greatest project successes you could imagine, producing this iconic building that really defined, what Australia is. So, um, there's that type of situation where the triple constraint mattered, but not to the point where it determined success. And then, there's the opposite that is true. You have, our Defense Department here in the U.S. building jets, fighter jets that are more and more capable, and they're doing a really good job of it, and from a triple constraint perspective. But they may come to the end of those projects and say, you know what? Now it's all about drone warfare. Why are we putting humans in these jets and, sending them, putting them in harm's way, when really drones do the same job and a better job, at that, and less expensive, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have a situation where you have everything's been done perfectly, from a triple constraint perspective, but is it a success? Maybe not, So, um, all these perceptions really do matter, at the end of the day, and the changing environment matters. And that brings us back to that more concept that we were talking about earlier. So, I'll stop there. And
It's interesting because everything's interesting to me. I think if I listen back to my podcast, it's interesting or so were the two words I ever say. But it's it's something that's defining value is, and I kind of think of the newspaper view of the big projects, the Sydney Opera House, maybe the jet things, the UK, some of the different HS2 and things like that, where they're big projects. They're the
Mhm.
ones who make newspapers because they're public money that is being spent more of, and it isn't the amount of money that people start with. And actually, I think it is, as a PM on one of those pieces of work, kind of how to um, because it's not newsworthy, is it, to say that, to give that grey description we talked about there, where you're saying, well, yeah, but we've done that, but the value of here and this has changed, and we decided to do that now because we identified a change in stakeholders and this group of people there, and we needed to do this. You can go through all those different conversations. That's not got a headline on it. Do you know what I mean? 10 billion more. What is it? A headline? Is it 10
Mhm.
billion of your money spent is what goes in the newspaper on one of the more salacious news channels or whatever? And it's, you get that, and as a industry, and yourself and all of the other industry leaders, those organizations, being able to address that perception, or is that pointless? Do you know what I mean? Trying to get one of the major news outlets to really think, and again, some of the more thought through outlets would give a more balanced view of understanding of it. But getting that general thing of them and the public to understand it ain't as simple as,
Mhm.
oh, it's cost more, because it is usually, it's going to take longer, it costs more. They don't really
Mhm.
care, and it don't work. That's the thing they all care about, or it's not doing what it said it was going to do. How do we as an industry address that, or is that just too far away as a difficult, and only we can do is satisfy ourselves, really?
I think there is something to that sort of satisfying ourselves bit. But if you're talking about the media, it's really about vision and expressing it in a clear, simple way. This is what we're accomplishing, and this is what's important. This is what matters. This is the value that's being delivered, and trying to communicate that in a compelling, motivating way is probably the most important thing there. Getting down into the minutia about, there's this much saved or that much, spent. Um, it's a difficult thing because you have to get down to a level of detail that most people just can't hear. You know,
Yeah.
it's not a big enough part of their lives to want to absorb that, you know. But the thing that is the what's in it for me. The you know the here's what you're going to see out of this, and it's all going to be worthwhile, you know. And I think as a project management professional, it's really important and helpful for you to be able to express that, express, you know, understand the vision and put it out there.
Is it, in some ways, um, it's a little shield for the profession as well. In that, if you're delivering something and then there's that short-sightedness of what, say again, so a large national project costing more, taking longer, not delivering the quality or time when they want to. If you're sat there going, yeah, but that bit isn't what the value is. The value is in 15 years when that government's gone and that government's been in and swapped, you know what I mean? They've swapped around three times
Mhm.
and they're all going to be criticising each other for this not delivering in time because it'll be over the spanning different parliaments.
Mhm.
If you're there as a PM and you know that the value is in 15 years, over
Mhm.
that period of time, it will have delivered X amount of value. And that's what the real value is. I don't know, maybe it's a thing to help underprivileged kids, and you know you've saved 50,000 lives and put them on the good track within schooling or something like that. That
Mhm.
gives you a PM, as a PM or as an organisation, you could sit there and go, yeah, I know I'm getting all this crap for the short-sightedness, but actually that longer term goal helps us. So there's a reason to have that vision of the bigger success concept, even if no one's listening to it, if you like, not quite no one. You know what I mean? If it's just if it's the right thing and it's not the popular opinion about it.
Yeah, you know, hopefully we can underpin that vision with some substance. You know, like in a lot of agile projects today, you're conducting experiments that illustrate how your project is going to scale. You know, if you're talking about feeding hungry children on the other side of the world, you know, you think that it will scale to, you know, address the needs of millions or you know,
Yeah.
more, you know, children, if you've conducted an experiment that works with 10,000, you know, and you can say, you know, you can describe that in um, enough detail, just enough detail that shows that, you know, we've done this much and that's going to scale to this much, you know, clearly that's, you know, compelling. And it's more substantive than just saying, hey, eventually it's going to do something good, you know? So we as project managers need to understand how to deliver the vision, maybe underpinned by with some substance that was part of the project that we're managing. So I think it's
It,
helpful.
it's interesting because that vision, that communication that you talk about there. One of the things I was kind of sat with one day chatting to someone is the fact that project management is about communication.
Yeah,
It's all about communication. Every single thing we use is communication. I sometimes think communication plan is a bit of a silly thing because if you write a Gantt chart, that's communication. You do a weekly report, that's communication. You have a risk log, that's communication. You've got the finances, that's communication. Everything is communication. And us being good at communicating is critical for us to succeed. And I think there's an element of that is that ability to sell as
hmm
part of that job, which is dirty word to a lot of people. And you kind of being able to pitch that vision, that 30-second elevator speech sort of thing of what your project's doing and what it's delivering, and that the guy sweeping up, putting a man on the moon. What do you
right.
do here? Oh, I helped put a man on the moon. That kind of, and that's where we've got to kind of build that nub of that value that you're talking about there of your experiments. Why are you doing this experiment? Oh, we're on our way to creating a project that saves thousands of lives. We're on our way to a project that creates 40,000 jobs. And it's having that vision to be able to talk about it in that way and sell it in that way
hmm Yeah,
to
I
your
think
team, to your stakeholders, to the outer public and press sort of stuff. Do you think that is that an area that we need to think about as a community, as a profession as well?
absolutely yes. I mean, as in. PMI context, that's what we would call power skills. We have something called the talent triangle, which on one side is ways of working, and then you have business acumen on another side, and then you have power skills on the third side. And power skills are essentially the way you influence others. It's that having the EQ, having the ability to help get the best out of a team, collaboration, to help to get the best motivated team, drive them forward in a unified way. Having a shared vision, how do you achieve a shared vision? Part of it's that shared struggle we talked about earlier, and part of it is how am I articulating this so people want to get behind it? They want to use their discretionary time to get there. They want to,
Yeah.
work means something to them other than just sort of getting something done and stamping it out and going, leaving it exactly 5 o'clock to go home. How do you make the work meaningful enough uh, to put the extra effort in and make it really a true success in everyone's eyes, in all those perceptions, not just, on the numbers, but from a perception perspective, all of your influential stakeholders are satisfied and say, you know what, that was a success. I believe
Yeah.
in what you've done.
That's yeah. It's that power skills, and it's something that's just occurred to me. I don't think it's a coincidence that's triangle, is it?
No.
I've had my PMP for years, and I know that triangle's been there for a long time, and I've never thought about the fact that it's the triangle. So that's just made me chuckle in the back of my mind there.
Yeah.
It's obviously you've got this research on the
Mm.
success.
Right.
What happens next with that?
Well, I think we're doing a lot of work this year to drill down on our main findings, and um, I I'll go over that in just a moment. But I think there are two key findings that we had with this past year's research that are very, very important. Beyond just the project success score and the sort of definition of success, which are very important, and we're validating that in this year's research. There was important findings related to measurement and sustainability that I think we need to mention. Measurement meaning locally you measure your product based on the value that specific product is delivering. So there's, I mentioned people wanting us to define value. It sort of depends on the project, depends on who's perceiving that value, about the project. We all have metrics that hopefully are somehow attached to the organizational strategy, related to the project. We're measuring the project in various ways that are meaningful. And there's three things that every project manager should do during the course of a project that are very, very important. The first is establishing success criteria up front. And the second is uh, establishing a performance measurement system, putting the right metrics in place and a way to sort of track those in place in a way that aligns and guides decision making. That's very, very important. And the fact that measurement system aligns and guides decision making. So you pick the right metrics and you pick the right way of tracking them. And then that you track the performance of the project across the life of the project, at least, if not beyond. If you do those three things, we found that you actually double your chances of success. So, I mean, that's hugely significant. So we're not dismissing the fact that you need to do local measurement by saying perceptions are important. That's just another layer on top of all of the measurement that you would typically do on your project, including the triple constraint. All of that very, very important. And you look at those three things and you say, oh, well, that's what we do all the time. But we found that only 37% of projects do that, out of those 10,000 plus that we surveyed. That's a huge opportunity. That's more than half of projects. And if you just make sure you do those three things, if you have a PMO and you say, we got to do these three things on every project. I mean, how many times have you been on a project or seen a project where the success criteria is not established for a few months into it, or
Yeah.
or 3 months into it, you look at it and say, this doesn't even make sense. The success criteria that we put in doesn't make sense, and you've got to redo it again. That that has a huge impact on the success of your project. If you don't get that right up front, and then how many times have you seen metrics that don't matter, vanity metrics, that kind of thing? They're not able to help you align and guide decision making. That's a big deal. It's getting those three things right are a very, very big deal, from a measurement perspective. So that's one key finding that we think everybody should know about, and something you kind of take away and apply right away. Um, the more surprising key finding that we had was around sustainability, especially in today's world where, sustainability, the concepts, the ideas have had their ups and downs, from a geopolitical perspective.
Yeah.
Um, what we did was we looked across the UN SDGs and, surveyed people and understood like how connected their projects were to those UN SDGs, essentially social good. And we found that if your project had a measurable a measurable connection to social good, again, your success rate roughly doubled. And we thought, wow, that's really interesting. We didn't think that that would happen, that people would care that much, in today's world, right? And then
Is
this
it?
is across project stakeholders, not just project managers, but like executives, customers, all of that. I'm sorry, go ahead. You were going to say
I was
something.
just thinking on that. Is it see that success rate? And I guess, as you say, that's some of the analysis you'll be doing there. Is kind of makes you wonder whether that joint goal, that joint vision of if your teams can see and stakeholders and everyone else can see the fact that this is being done and delivers
Mhm.
those other benefits from a sustainability point of view, that that goes back to what you were saying before about people going up those putting that extra effort, putting those discretionary hours to make it a success, have that flexibility to say, well, yeah, I'll drop this and I'll do that. You know what I mean? Is it? Yeah, I just wonder whether that'll be something. I guess you're going to try and work out whether that is what the nub of it is. It creates a better team with that shared goal that is bigger than themselves, a bigger thing than just them and their project, if you like.
Nigel, that was exactly what we thought our strongest hypothesis was. And that very well may be true. We just didn't have the data to bear that out. But one thing we did find that I thought was really interesting and more business connected than just what I've talked about so far was that there's a strong correlation between customer satisfaction and the and actual connection to sustainability. So for projects that were connected, measurably connected to social good, 55% of those projects achieved their target level of customer satisfaction. For those that were not, that number was only 33%. So there's a big difference in customer satisfaction just based on the connection to social good or sustainability at some level. And I think that's really important because only 20% or 22%, sorry, of projects made that connection. So the vast majority of projects out there in the world, there's an opportunity there to make that connection and not only have it be good for the world, you could do good and for the world and also do good for your business at the same time. That's an important message for people to get at, especially this day and age when we're perhaps not as keenly focused on those issues as a planet.
I
Um,
wonder how many of those were actually delivering things that would connect to those goals and just hadn't recognized it and didn't figure as part of their dialogue anyway. And then they're actually doing it, but not recognizing they're doing it.
yeah, we have a partnership with green project management folks, where there's a course on sustainability on our website, the Sustainable Project Manager. I believe I'd have to go back and look at the
Yeah.
title, but they map these things back to what they call the P5 standard, and it's a way of looking at your project and understanding which UN SDG it might line up with. and sort of exploring that and understanding
Yeah.
that value. And I think it's a worthwhile exercise to do that, because
Yeah.
not just for the customer satisfaction bit that I was talking about before, but for that motivation, for that understanding of, hey, we're delivering this value, we're helping people get jobs, or we're you know
Yeah.
uh, helping there be a cleaner planet, or providing education to people who wouldn't otherwise get it, or equal opportunity to folks that wouldn't otherwise see that. These are important things, that we need to keep in mind. So
Yeah.
we're drivers of change. We should drive positive change.
I agree. I agree entirely. Like, I'm just thinking that I've got my second question that I was going to ask you. It might lead on to that. Uh, the standard, because I'm just realising we're coming up on an hour and five, and I know you've probably got other things to go and do, rather than chat to me all afternoon. Just what kind of, as long as time you've got, what are the next steps that PMI are taking on this, and then sort of if there was something you wanted to mention that we hadn't got to today, but I think that first thing is what are those next steps that are going on? And actually, if people can get involved in that, is there any way they can get involved?
Yeah, there's a few things that we're working on. There's this year's research is focused on a number of subtopics related to the findings that we had in the 2024 study. One, we're sort of validating the baseline that we established in terms of project success score, and all of that by industry, by project type, etc. And then secondly, we're diving deeper into a number of topics. One of them is more, that I described earlier. What exists out there in the world? To what degree are people doing this today? And then, sort of comparing that to what degree do we think, or do they think that they should be doing it, going forward? That's going to be, I think, important information, especially if we're able to get down to practices and that sort of thing. Um, we're looking at measurement more deeply. What are those systems of measurement that could be applied in various scenarios, industries, project types, that sort of thing. Maybe what's working, what's not. Um, and sustainability, again, I mentioned that, taking a closer look at its relationship to project success, but also things like, how are these things communicated? Like if we're looking at um, uh, any of these angles, related to sustainability plus, equals project success, a lot of that is communication. A lot of that is how people are talking about the relationship between your project and how it impacts the world. So that's very, very important. The last thing is AI and its relationship to project success. To what degree is this stuff making us more successful? We know minute to minute, day to day, it's helping us, but to what degree is it making projects more successful? And so we're looking at all those things more deeply. I think this all of this, we're going to come up with some great insights, I'm sure, because we're doing the same scale of research that we're doing in the past year, making a huge investment in it, and I think it's going to be really, really interesting. Um, if people are interested in participating, there's a variety of ways to do that, and they could certainly reach out to me if that's easy. I'm on LinkedIn. That might be the easiest way to get to me, or Dave.Garrett at PMI. So I just wanted to mention that the project success work from last year is available at pmi.org/project success. That's an easy way to get to it. It gets the full report there. And there's a lot that we're saying about more, that's that I think could help a lot of project managers. So all over the website, you'll see mention of more.
Brilliant. Well, Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show. Obviously, people can get in touch with you on LinkedIn. I'll put some links in the show notes, and they'll jump in there. So all I can say is have a fantastic rest of your day,
You too,
and look after yourself.
you too, Nigel. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.
Thanks. Cheers. Bye.
Bye bye now.
Well, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Creaser, and it's goodbye from him, the Sunday Lunch PM. Goodbye.